Hi, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie, and I'm here with my husband Jim, and we are going to talk about artificial intelligence. It is Monday evening, which is when we have bumped our podcast to Mondays. Um, Several reasons. First, I get ready for work on Mondays, which means I have a little bit of makeup left over at the end of the day. But I'm also spending a lot more time with our daughter because she is 30 weeks pregnant and we are starting to get ready for our first grandbaby to get here, which means I'm doing things like washing baby clothes and remodeling kitchens and all that fun stuff that people like to do before they have their first child. So let's talk about cheating. Specifically, I sent you an article, Jim, that was in the New York Magazine's Intelligencer.
Can't figure out either how to say that or what the heck why they picked that name. I was looking at it going, I thought it was just the New York Magazine, and then I thought that word was just like a nonsensical word. I ignored it.
Right.
But I have no idea what that word means. But anyway, it's
gone viral. The article has gone viral.
The article has gone viral because it did exactly what the author wanted it to do, invoked a passionate argument about cheating versus not, which you and I have seen over and over again in the last 2.5, 3 years. We've been talking about AI every time we go somewhere, every time we talk to a school district, every time there's always a group of people in the crowd that think the only thing AI is good for is cheating.
Correct.
So you have told me 100 times, and you've said this in lots and lots of our trainings, cheating's been around a long time. This is just a new tool to cheat. So
it's just a new tool.
Let's see if
I wrote an article, and let me look and see. I've got the article pulled up here because I want to actually see. I wrote it August the 26th of 2024. Okay.
So last
year. It was called Address the Why, Not the How. Okay. And it wasn't a long read. It was about 7 minutes. But basically, I did a whole bunch of research because I'm like, look, guys, this is not something new. I mean, I was in administration. I've been a teacher for a long time. I was a counselor. I had to dole out punishments for cheating well before AI was on the scene. And to me, it's like, look, and there's actually a study, and that's something that I had you do for me, as I was like, hey, Jim, pull up those studies. Let's see if it's actually gotten worse. And the studies that I found a year ago were basically saying that AI had actually caused a little bit of a dip in the amount of cheating that was happening because kids were paranoid because of all that plagiarism detectors and all the AI detectors that were out there.
I know the coding people, the ones that even like Jared, are paranoid about using coding tools because they're afraid they're going to get accused of cheating, for using somebody else's code. Like every coder on the planet doesn't use nobody writes all the code themselves. They use other people's code. That's not new.
Yeah, they use repositories. They use libraries or whatever, right?
So anyway, but I thought it was because you'd asked me to do that a year ago. You asked me to do it again recently.
Right. And I was curious because a year ago, what I decided, and the reason I wrote the article, was that yes, cheating is happening, but it's not increasing because of artificial intelligence. And that the reasons that kids cheat, I'm going to tell you real quick what I said they were based on research, was the pressure to perform. So has that gone away? No. It hasn't. It's actually worse now, in my opinion. The pressure to perform was one of the major reasons that kids cheated. The fear of failure, because they've been raised in a competitive world, and those who win are the ones who are rewarded, right? So they have this fear of failure. There's a lack of time. You can't just apply for colleges. If you want to go to a decent college, if you want to get a decent job, you have to have a curriculum vitae or a resume and all of these letters of recommendation. I mean, or a lot of money, and a parent who donates for a brand new library to be built or whatever on the campus. So you have to do all of this stuff for your resume. So you have this lack of time because you're doing all these extracurricular activities.
What you really have to do is get the swimming coach to verify that you were on the swim team even when you weren't.
Yeah.
And then you get to go to jail for fraud, for fraudulently, yes, the one mom that
They had to make an example of her.
They had to make an example of her. So
the other reason that cheating was a thing, according to my research back in 2024, was a lack of consequences. There wasn't a clear set of consequences. If you got caught, then oh well, no big deal. So they didn't have good policies. They weren't telling you exactly what's going to happen.
I don't think there was no consequence. I don't think they were consistent. I just don't think they're consistent now.
Yeah,
and honestly, I don't know that they should be. I mean, consistency implies there's a single set of rules that you can apply to a situation. At least that's what it means to me. I, just like we do with a lot of things at our school, did this kid break this Chromebook intentionally or not? We rely on the judgment of the people that are with them every day to decide. Now, I do realize that lack of consistency also leads to biases coming in, but you cannot get rid of biases as a human being. So try to teach the teachers the best you can and the administrators the best you can. But at the end of the day, some of it's going to have to be a judgment call.
Well,
consistency to me is more important than whether or not you have punishment at all.
Right. The last one that I put in the article was unmonitored environments. Okay. Dennis Hill used to tell us all the time, if it's not monitored, it's optional, right? But the other thing was weak assignment design. And to me, that's a really big one.
Well, one of the case study things I pulled up that really got people talking about this too was this kid, Chungin Roy Lee, who he was the one that he got getting kicked out of Columbia. He built a browser overlay called Interview Coder to feed AI answers into remote coding interviews. So basically, he made it to where they could cheat, because you remember we have to run the Chromebooks in browser mode, in kiosk mode, so the kids can't do anything. Well, he figured out a way to do a browser overlay in these coding interviews that allowed the kids to get AI to answer coding questions because you could see what's on the screen. And they used him, and he said it's perfectly legit. He ended up getting kicked out. He actually, as much as he effort as he spent getting into Columbia, at the end of the day, he wanted to go viral because he realized he wanted to build a company. So he wanted the attention, and he got it. He got kicked out.
He was like, that's the only way to get anywhere nowadays because it's so competitive out there. The best way to get funding for a company is to come up with something that goes viral. And it went viral, and he got funding.
Well, so from what I gathered from the studies that I did recently, the stuff that I pulled out recently, the only thing that's happened is because they're defining using AI as academic dishonesty, that's gone up. That's not a surprise. The reasons haven't changed at all. As a matter of fact, as you said, they've gotten worse since your August 2024. So the studies bear out the fact that you were right when you said it back in August. You put a tremendous amount of pressure. The reward system is based solely, you're not allowed to fail.
Right.
And what's idiotic about this idea that I'm not allowed to fail is, I used to ask the kids this all the time. When you do something correctly, have you learned anything? And the answer is not really, because you already know how to do it.
I had a maker space, and the kids learn the most out of mistakes.
If you make a mistake, you learn the most because now theoretically you go back and figure out what you did wrong and you fix it. So you learn something. Our system is set up around the idea that you can't fail and then fix it, because you get one shot at this. You get, and these high stakes exams are the worst possible example of the pressure you were talking about that you put on them. They have taken pressure to a whole new level. If I had to go to high school today, I would do so badly because I'm one of those ADHD kids. I would do so badly because the whole thing is based on tests, and that is the thing I do the worst at. So, as I said, when you asked me to reassess where things were, and I did, and every single article I found dating back in November of 2024, which is after you wrote that, every single one of them says exactly what you said before, that kids are using it more. Columbia case study said 90% of the self-reported survey implied cheating has become normalized. Normalized, I disagree with that statement. If you were going to cheat before, you're probably going to cheat now. It's become frictionless, less friction. When you make it easier, if you were going to do it anyway, kids that might not have done it before are now more likely to. if they were kind of on the fence, it's like those, what do you call them? Those kids that are right on the line. Used to call them in testing. If you
like
want
the mean, the median, and
no, you guys just draw a line on the board, and you said
the bubble
bubble
kids.
kids. You had the kids that were way above the line. You had the kids way below the line. You had kids right on that. So if you've got a kid that's right there in a class, or they've got 5 other classes, and this one class they're spending too much time on, they're not getting. Those kids are going to be, if it's easier, they're going to use it. Yeah, it's easy. Used to, I Google it, pull up a paper, or get a friend, like you said, get a friend to write it, all this other stuff. Now I can just type in a prompt, and if I'm good at prompting, I can probably get a pretty decent paper, and then I can, there's websites like Humanize It that'll take what you wrote and make it more likely to pass an AI cheating detector, which is why when we had that guy on our podcast that created Copy Leaks. He said they're moving more from an adversarial role to a consultative role, which is how I think we ought to be thinking about this. Instead of worrying about whether or not they're cheating, let's start being more consultative.
Let's grade the chats. I mean, one of the best ways to get a kid
quality
to
of question.
Stop. Yes, one of the best ways to get a kid to stop doing something is to put it out there that they're doing it. It's like, okay, guys, I want you to do this. It's kind of like, okay, I was a photographer back in the day, and the number one way I got a kid that didn't want to smile was by literally sitting there telling him not to smile. I mean, yeah, that's a real simple example, but it's the same thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you a research project on, here you go, my favorite word, the Peloponnesian War. I'm going to give you a research project on the Peloponnesian War. Now I want you to use an AI, and I want you to turn in what you and the AI come up with.
Because I'm going to grade you on the quality of the questions you ask. Now, you can go ask another AI to help you with the questions. So you get into this cycle. But I remember when we were growing up, and the teachers would say, we're going to have an open book test. And everybody would go, oh, God, don't do, because the teachers back then knew that when they gave you an open book test, you better know that chapter backwards and forward, because they weren't going to give you enough time to really sit there and read every word in it. So you better know where to go find that stuff that's in there that answers the questions. So when a teacher wanted to give us one of those, you'd think, the kids would be going, yay, open book, I don't have to study. We're all going, oh my God, we got to study more.
No.
Well, isn't that the equivalent of what you just said?
Yes, absolutely it is. It's like, are the ones that they let you bring one piece of paper front and back with your notes.
I would rather do that. I'd rather do that than the open book test.
How much did I learn trying to figure out what notes were important and what notes weren't important to try to fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper?
I'd rather do that than the open book test. The open book test to me was worse because the professor, it was no holds barred. The teacher or the professor, whether it was K-12 or college, it was no holds barred. They literally knew that every single sentence in that material was game.
Right. But I want to go back to what you just said, how you might use one AI to create the prompts to give to the other AI. Just the step of going from one AI to the next and one AI to the next is learning. Because you have to verify the information back and forth. So I am 100% convinced that the way in which we design our lessons and we design what we're looking for as output or proof of knowledge is going to have to change.
Yeah, it's going to have to change, and it's going to have to change quickly because AI is getting better and better every day. The studies on the number, the kids aren't going to stop using it suddenly, and you're not. I know teachers already that are going, I'm going to have them use the old blue books and handwrite stuff. Okay, well, you talked about pressure earlier. How hard is it to grade 120 blue books?
Hard.
And the teachers are all saying, I don't have enough time as it is because I have to make sure I teach this material. I've got the requirements. I have to go at a certain pace. But, oh, by the way, we're going to make you start handwriting, and I'm going to hand grade it.
Okay, I've got to jump in here and say that you are just opening yourself up for talk about bias. Because if I have 120 blue books sitting in front of me,
by the time you get to 90,
by the time I get, forget 90, by the time I'm 10 blue books in,
I'm tired.
I'm tired. And not just that, but I'm already going, especially as a K-12 educator, all right, here's this student. I know this student's really good in my class. I'm going to give a cursory glance at that paper. I am not going to give it, and I'm just going to give that kid an A.
You know what the teachers used to do when I was growing up? Some of the teachers, they would get the students they knew was going to make an A anyway to get us to help grade them. I used to grade other people's stuff.
Well, yeah, and I had one that used to always say, like, if you can tell me the Friday night football game score, I'll give you an extra 15 points on your overall grade or whatever.
They never gave us 15 points for that. We only got 5 points for that. I got gypped.
Same teacher, I bet. It was just a few years later. Yeah. So we don't want teachers to go back to that, and they will, because
I think it's counterproductive.
They'll be exhausted.
I think it's counterproductive. I think the whole thing is a self.
It's a doing a disservice to your kids, because your kid will not graduate from that high school class where that English teacher had them handwrite all their papers and go into a college class and do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They won't. So you're doing a disservice. And I think that's where administration and school boards need to step in and say, okay, guys, we're going to have a policy in place. We're going to have an AI acceptable use. We're going to have all of these guidelines for our teachers in place. And the disparity between the English teacher on one side of the hallway and the English teacher on the other side of the hallway that are teaching the same exact grade level and the same exact curriculum, supposedly, one says no to AI and the other says AI is okay, that gap is not doing good. And we in the United States are falling further behind now that AI is on the scene.
Well,
do you agree with that?
I do agree. Well, first of all, it's hard to measure the definite engineer. I don't oversimplify things like I should, but the idea that we're falling behind implies that somebody has a goal or a vision as to what the future looks like. To fall behind implies that you know where the race is going, because you can't measure where your standing is in the race if you don't know what the end goal is in the race. And used to, the end goal was to get as many kids college educated as you could. I mean, that's what rolled through the 80s and the 90s, is going to college, going to college, going to college, going to college. I think that the goalposts have moved, and I don't know that we can say we're behind. If you define behind as teaching AI to kids, then yes, we're falling behind, because the one thing the Chinese can do is you don't get to argue in China whether or not you're going to teach it. This is what you're doing, and there isn't a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to Europe and you look at how they do their schools, well, first of all, they pay their teachers a whole lot more. So they tend to get the teachers that are truly wanting to be a career educator, because they fight for the positions. So they see it as a competitive thing, and they want to stay up with all this stuff. Here, we don't pay them enough, and then we dump all this junk on them and want them to spend all the time doing it. And they're going, you know what? I got a family. I'm tired. I'm just not going to do it. So I think
I saw something today. It said, if you work in a profession that has an appreciation week, then you don't get paid enough.
Got that right.
Because basically it's like, Teacher Appreciation Week. We're having to do that.
Prizes.
The parents are bringing prizes and food and stuff to the teachers. And if you work in one of those professions that you have a whole week that's dedicated to you, then you probably don't get paid enough. I thought that was pretty funny.
Well, it is. I mean, it's a little cynical, because you could argue that the parents just want you to show you how much they appreciate you. But most teachers I meet nowadays, they want the parents to show them appreciation by being more respectful. But that's a different discussion. I thought I read something that was interesting, though, and I was going to kind of put you on the spot with it and see if you could answer it. Because one of the things that I was reading about, it was like a study, but I can't find the exact study. But they were talking about the change necessary. The current educational system is set up around testing your ability to retrieve. But if the retrieval knowledge cost has gone to near zero with AI, and I'm not talking about the cost of electricity. I'm just talking about it's easy to retrieve knowledge when you have an AI front into it.
Mm-hmm.
So if the whole system is set up around testing your ability to retrieve knowledge, what do you replace that with?
To me, it would be testing your ability to use the knowledge that you have retrieved.
Project-based learning.
Yeah.
That's how I see it as an engineer, and I see exactly how that applies as an engineer. But how do you apply that to language arts?
Okay.
That's a retrieval thing.
It's easy. It's easy. Let's say I'm doing language arts and I am in 4th grade and we are learning about action words. Okay. So we're learning about verbs, right? Action words. Show me action.
Okay, so you're gonna
show me the action. So
there's a lot of action words. I can't show you all the actions.
You and 3 other kids are going to be doing a little short skit in front of the class, and the only thing you're going to be able to do is action words.
Now, what you just said, does that apply? How do I translate that into sitting down and taking a high stakes test on a Chromebook?
See, that's the problem. And actually, I'm going to pull up my phone real quick because our daughter actually sent us a thing about a Texas bill.
Yeah, which isn't going to pass.
Yeah, there was a Texas bill to overhaul the STAR test.
Went through the House, but not the Senate.
The House.
It's not going to clear the Senate.
But it's not going to clear the Senate.
It's not going to clear the Senate because
there's too much money involved.
They're trying to kill public education, and they're not going to help it out. The administrators have been screaming at the top of their lungs about STAR testing being a completely unreasonable measurement of kids' abilities and the pressure it puts on them. They've been screaming about it I've been there for 20 years. They've been screaming about it for the 20 years I've been there, and I think they were screaming about it before that.
Oh, they were. I remember my mom coming in. My mom worked for an elementary school back in Fred, Texas, back in like the 70s. It was in the 70s. And there was some sort of state exam that they were giving even in the 70s. I'm curious as to what it was called. But one of the questions on the exam was how many kids can sleep in a double bed.
I remember that. They said it was biased because
it's biased.
Your race determined how many you said.
Right, because and logically, if you're critically thinking, you're going to look at the word double and you're going to say 2.
That was the point of the question.
That was the point of the question. And so that's one of those things, if you want to go all the way back to what is critical thinking, if I say, how many kids can sleep in a double bed? And my answer is 6, because I live in a family that we turn the bed sideways and we're all short enough that we can all 6 sleep on the floor on the double bed. Okay, well, that's what that family was doing. 6 little kids were sleeping on the double bed.
But
okay, but that student that the question got thrown out because of those answers, the teacher wasn't teaching the student critical thinking. Critical thinking is when you can take yourself out of your environment and look at the question all on its own and notice the word double and know double means 2, therefore the answer is 2.
I don't think that without a change, I don't think you can reconcile the problem you have with teaching critical thinking skills, which as an engineering person, I always think of that as project-based learning. Applied knowledge is what engineers tend to want to do, and I don't care, even if I'm using an AI, the problems that are interesting enough that need to be solved haven't been solved yet in a way that AI is going to solve them automatically. AI can give you if you train an AI on all you know about a particular problem, like a medical problem, it can help you find patterns that may help you solve it. But at the end of the day, odds are it's probably not going to be able to make an intuitive leap to go to the problem that's interesting. I had a guy tell me that once, that the problem with doing math by hand is any problem worth solving, you can't solve it by hand. You're going to use some kind of computer to help you solve it, because the ones that you can solve by hand just aren't interesting enough. And we focus so much on the things we can do easily because that's what we want to teach. Project-based learning takes you beyond that, especially when, like what I used to do with my interns, I would tell my interns in the summer, I'm going to let you the last 2 hours of the day work on a project. The criteria is it has to benefit the school, but I want to tie it into something you're interested in, because I was trying to get them to learn to use the technology. In other words, learn new ways. If you're interested in AV, then make me a video tutorial. If you're interested in building computers, then you're going to do, whatever. So they would literally propose it. And I did this for many years. So I've been there for 20 years. I started doing it a year after I've been there. I noticed a change about 7 years ago. I had a student quit whenever I told them that, because they felt like that was too much. It was too much like a class, and they felt too much pressure to perform, and they didn't want to do that in a summer job. And I'm sitting there going, I didn't see that coming. I'm sitting there going, okay. At first I thought, well, you're just lazy. I mean, but then I realized one of them, because I knew the family, she didn't quit, but she was so upset that she was visibly distraught. And when I sat down and talked to her, it was literally about the feeling of pressure. And in her case, she was terrified of public speaking, and she liked AV, but she didn't want to be in front of a camera, which is what I had proposed she do. So all we did was adjust the project to where we let somebody else, Jared was there that summer, we let him read the script. She created the script. She was basically the behind the camera person.
Right.
The point was, is she learned a lot. She was one of the best interns we ever had, but we had to get through that one particular thing we'd never understood without applying the knowledge to something. And that's, right. I thought that was the right way to do it, because that's the way engineering people were taught whenever I was growing up. Was, take your mom and dad's stereo apart was considered a badge of honor. When I was 6 years old, I dismantled my mom's stereo and put it back together, and it mostly worked.
Especially when you had parts left over. I can remember I used to like music boxes and things like that. We would take those things apart, and we'd always have a couple of spare parts. And we're uh-oh.
Are you saying you were an engineering type, that you should have been an engineer?
No, I deny it.
Because I heard that. I heard that.
No, I deny it. So let's talk about the big picture.
Okay.
So motivations haven't shifted much, right?
No.
You were motivated to cheat a long time ago. You're motivated to cheat today.
You just got a new tool.
It's the same triggers. It's just a little more frictionless to do it now. It's not worse. You found data, and if anyone wants to make a comment on our podcast, I can share the information and where it came from. And I've vetted all the sources that you found. It's not really any worse than what it was.
It didn't take a big leap. If you got to cheat before, you just have a new tool.
Not like the articles are saying.
Yeah, not as big as they say. They made it sound like every kid now cheats, is how they were saying.
Right. And I think one of the reasons that they're seeing it in K-12 or not in K-12 is the surveys are actually a lot spottier. And kids in K-12 don't tend to want to answer surveys like that. So I don't know how clean that data is when it comes to
self-reporting has never been 100% clean anyway. So, all right. So what else you got? Continue.
No. So some of the other things that we wanted to talk about was basically.
Well, I was wanting to kind of wrap it up with, and I know this is a controversial thing to say, is education less valuable now? And I actually asked ChatGPT to answer that, and it said, if the only thing you value is information retrieval, then it's less valuable. And you have to change your paradigm. And when you start talking about changing the paradigm, it gets difficult to do that, because you can't change a piece of it, because they've spent so long fine-tuning the pipeline from kindergarten through college, and with the high stakes testing and how they evaluated you and all this other stuff. It's difficult when you shove something that can retrieve information so easily and synthesize information so easily. It just kind of explodes the pipeline. You have to rebuild the whole pipeline. And so I think the question that educators have to ask is my value what it was before? And if your value was stuffing as much as you could in a kid's head and then testing their ability to retrieve it, the answer to that question is you're not as valuable as you were before. That's not Jim talking. That is the billions of dollars that are being put into AI talking, with the expectation that people are going to use them and it's going to take jobs. And there's no scenario where that AI is in there where people are going to say the fact that you can remember the dates in the Peloponnesian War have value. They don't.
Right.
They just don't. They have less value. They never had a lot of value. I can tell you a lot of classes.
Just like reading an analog clock. I mean, I used to always talk about how eventually something had to fall off the bottom. You could only teach so much in 1 year. Eventually, you had to cut something out.
Make
And
that a
so
fun project and let the kid learn it on their own.
exactly.
It's a prerequisite, as they used to say in college.
There you go. So, bottom line, cheating has been a chronic issue in K-12 for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
AI made it easier, but it's still...
Generative AI hasn't suddenly created dishonest kids.
No.
It's just made it a lot easier.
It's frictionless was the term somebody used.
It's lowered the effort barrier.
Yes. Barrier to entry is lower. Yes.
The barrier to entry is lower. So, typing in a prompt is a lot easier than having to go find something in Wikipedia and retyping it in your own words.
Or copy pasting. Yeah.
Or copy and pasting.
Yep.
Okay. The detection of cheating is better now, because used to it was first it was the teacher that was having to figure out whether or not you cheated, and then it was the plagiarism checkers like CopyLeaks, which was basically just going through and saying, hey, here's a whole paragraph that I just found word for word on the web. And that wasn't perfect. But now with the AI detectors, even though they're not good, there's still a lot more of them out there. And so that's like, okay. And the other thing
I
is
think they're worse. I don't think they're better. I think they're worse.
They are worse. They're
because a lot
worse.
They're accusing too many kids of cheating that don't cheat. They're also forcing kids to spend a huge amount of time. They're not learning anything by spending, just like they didn't learn before by trying to bypass plagiarism detectors. They're not learning now by trying to spend all their time doing it. Anyway, we're out of time. Bottom line is that it's pretty much the same as it's always been. Cheating it's just changed the tool.
And now there's a lot more media attention to it.
Oh, yeah.
AI is making us talk about things we should have talked about a long time ago, which is why we say thank you, AI, because we're finally having conversations we should have had a long time ago.
I agree.
So what do we have coming up? We are going into a couple of districts. We are booking out for professional development. So if anyone's out there listening or wants to pass our name on, our calendar for July and August, first of all, July, grandbabies due. Not going to be booking us for that last part of July, but August, we're starting to book up some for our August PD dates.
We also have a conference we're going to. Because we like to go to Galveston.
I am 75% or more finished with my book, Teachers Have Bigger Fish to Fry. I am in the editing process right now, which is awesome. I'm enjoying that. So my name is Maurie, and I'm here with my husband, Jim, and we really appreciate you listening in, and we hope that you guys have a marvelous rest of the week.